Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek, the founder of Figured Out Baseball. Here with another Figured Out Baseball podcast. We've got Wayne Mazzoni on the phone with us today. Wayne is the current pitching coach at Sacred Heart University, a Division I school in Fairfield, Connecticut, a part of the Northeast Conference. I'll give you a bit of a background on Coach Mazzoni before we jump into questions with him, but we're really lucky to have him here today. I'm excited to get into things. I love talking pitching with guys because I was not a pitching coach myself, so I like picking the brains of pitching coaches just to kind of see what I can learn and hopefully share some good information. So a little bit about on Coach Mazzoni's background. He is a Northport, Long Island native. He's a 1991 graduate of Gettysburg College. At Gettysburg, he played football as a freshman and then played baseball his last 3 years. He was an outfielder and a left-handed pitcher. He's in 1992. In 1992, took his first coaching job as a graduate assistant at Nova Southeastern, which is a Division II school in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. That year, 1992, the team went 42-14. From 1993 to 1996, Coach Mazzoni was the pitching coach at Fairfield University, Division I school in Fairfield, Connecticut. In 1996, he had a 25th round draft pick. And then he actually took a break from college coaching from 1997 to 1999. He spent his time as an author and a speaker. He authored several books in that time, and still that's something that is pretty close to him, which I'm sure we'll get into that later. Got back into coaching for the spring of 2000. In the spring of 2002 until 2005, he was the head coach at Post University, which is a Division II school in Waterbury, Connecticut. He turned a team around there that won 6 games in 1998 to set a school record for wins several times in his tenure there. 2006, he became the pitching coach at Holy Cross, got back into Division I at that time. Holy Cross is a Division I in Worcester, Massachusetts. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Kind of a little nugget there. In 2006, Coach Mazzoni actually coached Matt Blake, who is now the new pitching coach for the New York Yankees. Kind of a cool little tidbit. And then from 2006 until present, he's been the pitching coach at Sacred Heart University. In his time there, the team has been to the conference championship 8 of the last 10 years. They've won 3 conference championships in that stretch. Coach Mazzoni at Sacred Heart has had 4 pitchers that have moved on to play pro ball, including an 8th rounder in 2014. And then Troy Scribner actually became the first Sacred Heart pitcher to pitch in the major leagues when he made his debut for the Angels in 2017. His pitchers also include the 2011 Conference Rookie of the Year. He's had 9 pitchers on the all-conference team. The Sacred Heart pitchers in Coach Mazzoni's tenure have also set the school record for wins and ERA several times while he's been there. He's a well-known speaker at baseball conventions. In fact, we've got him on the phone here today on his way to a high school to speak about recruiting, which is one of the topics that he's very passionate about. He's the author of several books on recruiting, on the mental game, playing college baseball, and how to get to have an opportunity to play college baseball. He's also big into private instruction. He does both online instruction as well as in-person instruction at a local facility. Coach Mazzoni, we're very, very glad to have you here today, and I just appreciate your time very much.
Well, with that introduction, I might have to hire you to come and introduce me at all my various speeches. That was unbelievable.
I'd be happy to travel with you. Very happy to. Thank you very much. Well, let's get right into it. I'd like to start, Coach, with kind of touching on some things from resumes that stick out to me. And the first thing, actually just going in order from kind of where things started for you. You went to Gettysburg College, and you started out as a football player and did not play baseball as a freshman, and then played baseball your last 3 years. Would you mind just kind of telling us how that transpired, or how you came to give up baseball and then flip back to baseball as a sophomore in college?
That's a great question. I haven't been asked that one in a while, but really I went there with the idea that I would play both for all 4 years, and then very quickly realized that even Division III football was pretty darn competitive, and I just got thumped as a freshman. I mean, I was physically beat up running the scout team, and just there's some great stories my buddies tell about, me getting thumped on scout team my entire freshman year. But at the end of that year, I was so beat up, I just didn't see how I could continue on and play baseball that spring. So I kind of met with the coaches and said, listen, my passion really is with baseball. I'm going to dedicate the rest of my career to doing that and give up football, and that's really what I did. But I wanted to play both, and just even at the D3 level, it's tough, really tough.
Yeah, I think people discredit sometimes with any sport, really. But I think people that haven't been a part of it or haven't played at that level will look at Division 1, 2, and 3 and think that there's this huge disparity. And you have not coached at the Division 3 level, but you've played and you've also coached at the Division 1 and Division 2 level. From your experience, would you just kind of tell people that are, maybe we have some kids that are listening out there that are in high school or high school coaches, really what you've seen to be the difference between the different levels? I mean, you can speak from your football if you'd like to, but also baseball. Really what's the difference? How much of a difference is there going from Division 1, 2, 3, even NAI ball? Like, where does that fit in? And what have you seen just from those levels for yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think the high school coaches and the travel coaches get it. They understand the difference in levels and how good Division 3 is. I think before I answer that question, that the parents and the athletes are the ones that don't understand how good Division 3 is, mostly because they've never seen it. So they've never watched a team practice or play. They don't realize the talent, the commitment, the size of those Division 3 athletes. In my experience, the best guys at the Division 3 level definitely could play Division 1 baseball and probably every sport. I think your average guy is definitely missing something in terms of whether it's speed or strength or skill. There's definitely a difference between, especially your higher end Division 1 and Division 3, but your average high school baseball player, Joe Average, is not good enough to make your average Division 3 team, and most people just don't realize that, again, because it's not on TV and they just don't go watch it in person, so they don't know.
I think it's what you just said is something that I've heard before on podcasts and just talking with coaches in general, but the real benefit of just going to watch whatever sport you play at various levels. If you want to play baseball in college, go watch a Division 1 team that's around you, but also go watch a Division 2 or Division 3 or a junior college team, and really that's probably one of the best ways to get an idea to figure out where you fit in. Would you agree with that?
1,000%. It's probably the best way, and it's something, again, I do a lot of these speeches, and I'll ask people in the audience, how many of you have been out and seen a D1, 2, or 3, and almost no one. So very few people have seen Division 3, and they're making a judgment just from their gut, which is more than likely incorrect.
And I'll tell you just as a personal story, my brother was 3 years older than me, and he played Division 2 baseball at a nationally ranked Division 2. And maybe it was just because he's my brother, but I always looked at him and thought that I was better than him. So I had my mindset on playing Division 1, and when I got there, it was just a much, much different level than you're used to seeing on an everyday basis. So even sometimes having a player next to you that you play alongside who plays at a certain level, that's even sometimes difficult to really get a great gauge. So I think just watching games is a great way to go about it.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in summer ball. With summer collegiate leagues, there's a lot of kids from the different levels, even D2 and D3 schools mixed in. Those kids hold their own. Now, obviously, they're the better players at D3, but something happened to where they just got overlooked. I mean, I don't want to sidetrack us, but we have a kid, probably the best player on our team, started out at a D3 before he transferred in because he got hurt in high school and kind of got overlooked recruiting-wise and then transferred in, and he's an absolute stud. So you just never know.
That happens a lot. As a former junior college coach, that was like what we lived on in junior college was guys that got overlooked for one reason or another, guys that got hurt and missed their junior year or sophomore year, some of the big recruiting years, and you can kind of scoop them up that way and get lucky finding a guy. There's something else in your bio, Coach, that I'd like to just ask you, well, kind of related, about multi-sport athletes. So you're somebody who played a couple of sports in college, and you got that experience. But I don't know what it was like when you were younger. I think everything seems like it's things get a little more, I don't want to say one-sided than as I think people a lot of times will say 10 years ago or 20 years ago this was way different than it is now. So I don't know if this is the case with this, but with multi-sport athletes, I believe that there is a push now for kids to really specialize at young ages. And at least from my perspective, I think that it's maybe because things are so competitive, sports are so competitive to try to compete for a scholarship that kids feel like if I don't play this sport all year round, I'm going to get passed up by somebody who does play all year round. And I think there's probably a bit of legitimacy to that. But what's your take on kids playing multiple sports? Has it changed over the years? And as a Division I recruiter and pitching coach, what are your feelings and thoughts looking at a high school kid who plays one sport compared to multiple sports?
That's a great question. I got a lot of feelings, and I'll kind of give you the two sides. I think why it's come about is that basically, a lot of people that have started travel teams, I'll just talk about baseball, but, these well-intentioned people that started these travel clubs are doing it because they love coaching. So they want to coach. They're not going to be high school or college coaches, but they start travel programs, and obviously that's pay for play. So what happens is, to run a legitimate business, you have to have enough teams, you have to have multiple seasons, winter training, you have to offer a competitive product. So a lot of these kids have now gotten into playing, more seasons, 2 seasons of baseball. Sometimes they're playing 3 seasons of baseball and then training all winter. I think for some kids that's the right move. If they don't love other sports, but for some kids that really loved playing a second sport, but have given it up just because they're being pressured into it. You have to do this to be able to play at the next level. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I had a quick conversation with a guy, anyone listening could look him up. His name's Joe Zangi. He's AAA pitcher with the Mets. Was probably one of the best catchers ever come out of the state of Connecticut. High school, went to UConn first, then transferred to a junior college, was a catcher, and the Mets, made him into a pitcher. I saw him the other day, and I said, hey, you're a big guy, big, thick guy. I said, did you play football in high school? He goes, up to my sophomore year, then I focused on baseball, and I was told, it's the only way to go play at the next level. And I said, do you regret giving up those last 2 years? He goes, it's the only regret in my life. I miss playing. I still dream about playing high school football, he said. So my advice is, if you love playing those multiple sports, don't give it up because the coach tells you need to play fall ball or train in the winter only. Now, from the perspective of me as the college coach, I'm not any way more excited or less excited if a kid plays one sport or 2 or 3. I'm just looking for good kids that are the best players. But I will have everybody realize that, and maybe they do realize it or not, if you give up your second sport, you will never get it back. Once you go to college, you're going to be a one-sport athlete, especially if you're playing at the Division I level. So just don't give it up because you're pressured to do so. If you don't love your second sport and just want to do baseball, it's fine. But many kids wind up completely regretting giving up that other sport.
It's an interesting perspective. And if there's a parent listening to this, or even a player listening to this, who's listening to your words, Coach, and is still, just feeling a pull to say, well, yeah, but I see all these kids around me that are doing it. Do you think it's a legitimate concern for someone in that position to think that someone training for baseball, I'll say training 12 months out of the year, not that they're playing, but they're lifting for baseball specific, they're doing baseball specific lifts in the winter, they are playing spring, summer, and fall. Do you think that player, just, speaking honestly and just trying to give people, some credible information, do you think that those kids that train for one sport all year round are legitimately going to pass up the kid that might only play, high school and summer ball, and then he gets into football in the fall and basketball in the winter? Do you think there's a legitimate concern there for parents? And if so, or, parents and players, and if so, how do you overcome that, or what can be an option for that person to not, in order to not get passed up?
Well, I'll tell you this. The first piece is, you mentioned it. I mean, the kid actually doing 3 sports has become so incredibly rare. So I know what, my son plays football and baseball in high school. I know what the demands are from football, how it's all summer, what it takes during the season. For a kid then to go from football into basketball and then go play baseball, I think is going to be an absolute dinosaur. But at the same time, I do see a lot of those kids just training baseball year-round, and I think you just lose a little bit of a competitive edge sometimes. And there's only so many tee swings you could take. There's only so many pens and lessons you could take. And you certainly will get better focusing a little bit on one sport compared to say 2. But, I mean, my son again, I don't want to make it too personal, but I love that my son plays football. He learns toughness. He learned so many things, and we got back in the cage yesterday, and he started to hit, and he was like, holy cow, the ball's jumping off my bat. I go, yeah, because you gained 12 pounds during football with lifts 3 days a week, and, and now you're back in taking these swings. You're pumped to be back in the cage as opposed to going, oh, my God, I got to go back in the cage again. So everyone has to make their own decision. I just wouldn't want parents to actually be thinking, oh, my God, my kid can't play, 2 sports and still play at the college level for baseball. It's just not the case.
What do you think about a kid, and obviously there's a lot to it, but what do you think about a kid, because committing is happening so early, kids that are going to Division I schools, it seems like, Power 5 type kids are committing as freshmen and sophomores in high school, and, mid-major Division I guys are committing as sophomores and juniors, which is earlier even than, 5 years ago when I was coaching. It seems like everything has jumped up a year. But what do you think about a kid potentially, whatever his big recruiting year was, maybe focusing on one sport that year and then going back to a multi-sport thing as a junior, senior after they commit? Is that something legitimate that it maybe could be, just a solution to part of the issue, or is that, am I kind of off base there?
No, I guess that makes some sense, but I know plenty of success stories of kids that played multi-sports that are playing at, big-time colleges, and just, again, your summer is your hot and heavy recruiting time. So the fact is, if baseball is your number one sport, you need to be playing baseball in the summer, but that shouldn't preclude you from playing a variety of other, if you wanted to play soccer, you want to play basketball, you want to wrestle. I think coaches are going to like that. In our state of Connecticut, the best program is UConn, where Coach Fenders and their staff, they do an unbelievable job. And I know firsthand that he tells kids that he recruits as multiple sport athletes that he wants you to keep doing what you've been doing. He loves what it's made you more athletic. It's taught you so many things you couldn't learn just playing baseball year round. So there's very few coaches I know that would try to encourage high school kids to only play baseball.
Yeah, I think that's something that's pretty consistent. You rarely, if ever, maybe never actually, now that I'm kind of thinking about it, but rarely, if ever, hear a college coach saying, I think that you should definitely go down to one sport by this time. I think when you hear college coaches talk about it, it's usually the multi-sport athlete is a good thing.
Agreed.
So just to kind of touch on another point you just made about playing summer ball, if there's someone, again, listening to this, whether it's a coach or a player or a parent, who really wants to play baseball in college, do you think that it is an absolute necessity at this time, at this point where we are, 2019, 2020, spring of 2020 pretty soon, do you think it's an absolute necessity to play summer ball to get recruited, as opposed to people thinking that, well, I'll play high school baseball and I'll get seen then? Do you think it's an absolute necessity to play summer ball?
I would say very much so, unless if you pump 93 to 95, you're probably good. If you run a 6.3, 60, or you crush home runs, and you can, and if you're that good, you're probably going to want to keep playing in the summer because it's fun. You're beating everybody. I know kids, and this is its own separate topic. I know kids that play high school, don't play summer because they want to showcase themselves. So they go to camps and they just pick events that are best for their recruiting, which I don't really like, because I think they don't get a chance to play baseball enough. It should be fun to play baseball. You get better playing rather than just showcasing. And it is a little bit of a red flag when, instead of being kind of team-oriented, you're just simply out there trying to get yourself exposure. So I can't recall the last kid that I've recruited or dealt with that didn't legitimately play summer ball, except, after they've committed maybe the summer after their senior year, they're just and not playing the summer, getting ready for college. But yeah, it would be a little odd if a kid didn't play summer ball.
Okay. I was asking that because I'm an associate scout, and I saw a kid last spring who really, I talked to the player and the parent, and he wanted to play baseball in college, and I kind of asked what his summer plans were, and he said he was going to play Legion, but he was also traveling with AAU basketball, and I kind of said, well, do you want to play basketball or baseball in college? Well, I definitely want to play baseball. And I really encouraged him to get on a travel baseball team, because I said, look around. I go to a lot of high school baseball games, and I rarely see a college coach at a high school baseball game. It's just because you guys are playing at that time of the year, and the weather at that time of the year is a lot more questionable, and And I just told this player that the majority of recruiting, I believe, goes on in the summer. So I just wanted to get your take on that, someone that's still in it, someone that's right there in the front lines.
Yeah, one just comment on that is, and listen, Legion, just like travel teams, but Legion in its own right, it varies very much from town to town. I mean, there are kids in my neck of the woods that play Legion that have a great experience, get a whole lot better, get recruited to play at that next level. And then, of course, there are other Legion programs that never get any exposure, and the kids are just playing for fun or whatnot. But I wouldn't say, now that kid, that is traveling for AAU, that could be really, for basketball, that could be difficult. And you're right, at some point you have to go, gee, what do I want to do at the next level? And you have to make a decision. So that kid needs to, if he wants to play college baseball, is going to need to spend more time in a baseball field than a basketball court.
So if we just kind of stay on the topic of recruiting, Coach Mazzoni, I like to ask the question of what do you look for in recruits? What do you like when you're out there? But let's talk specifically about pitching, as you are a pitching coach. Besides, well, let's just touch on velocity first. For you as a Division I pitching coach, what velocities do you like to see? And I'd like to get your take, on it's not only velocity, but give me a range that maybe a bottom end like this, you need to be at least here. And as you kind of maybe move up, maybe there's are different qualities you're looking for. But is there a velocity range that you feel like you need to see maybe from, sophomore, junior recruiting class in high school?
Yeah, I would say that to get any serious, to even move it any bit forward, if you're not throwing 82, 83, it's just not going to be that interesting because, and the reality, and this is, boy, we could talk about this for hours and hours of, is a kid that's throwing 79 with pitchability and 3 pitches and movement and location, is he probably better than the kid throwing 84 with 1 pitch and no real off speed, et cetera? Probably, but the fact of the matter is if I see a kid throwing 79 with pitchability, in my head I'll think, well, I'll just find a guy throwing 83, 84 with pitchability. So velocity, if nothing else, is used just to narrow down the list of kids because there's just so many kids pitching a baseball that now you could say, all right, until you're throwing 82, 83, I'm just not all that serious about getting any further. Now, I might say, boy, I like this kid's delivery. I like everything. I heard great things about him. I love that he plays center field, and he's only 79, 80. Now, I'll keep track of this kid, but, unless you're throwing 82, 83, it's just probably not going to get my attention.
Okay. That's from the right side, I'm assuming, or both?
Yeah, probably would say both. Now, I mean, eventually, we run the gamut. I mean, I've had freshmen walk in the door throwing 87, 89, both righty and lefty. But I've had guys, the kid Scribner, came into Sacred Heart throwing 83 from the right side, left throwing 89. It's the only big leaguer we've ever had. So, you learn along the way. It's more than velocity. Obviously, if you have certain qualities and then your velocity keeps going up, you become tremendous. But, yeah, I mean, the lefties always can be a little bit lower on the velocity, but mid-80s, you start getting really into starting to take them seriously. And then if they get to upper 80s, that's kind of where you'd want them. And then for us at Sacred Heart, and this is not a slight on our program, but, if I see a guy throwing 92, 93 at an event, I probably wouldn't even waste my time because I'm generally not going to get a kid out of high school throwing 92, 93. He's going to pick a bigger program or he's going to get drafted. So, I want you to throw hard, but not too hard.
That's a great script. Great script. All right. So besides velocity, going out and looking for pitchers, what things? What can a kid do to you to stand out? Because you're right. There are so many people out there that are pitching a baseball that are trying to find a scholarship that want to play Division I baseball. What are some things besides velocity that stand out to you that make you pay more attention to a guy, make you want to have that guy, pitching for you?
Yeah, the easy thing is, first of all, command of 1 or if not 2 legitimate secondary pitches that you will throw at any time. So if I watch a kid, he's throwing 82, 83, 84, and he's in a 2-1 count and he spins a breaking ball, or at 3-1 he throws a changeup, I get crazy excited, right? I mean, because that just shows trust in a secondary pitch. So I'm looking for, obviously, ability to throw strikes, but also command. But it's that guy will have a legitimate go-to secondary pitch, and if he's got two go-to secondary pitches, that's going to set him way apart of everybody else. And that would be step one. My next thing would just be probably athleticism and tempo. You know, is this kid fun to watch pitch? Do they command the mound? Do they pitch with tempo? Do they move athletically with a good delivery? That kind of thing. So it's the way the ball out, but also how they kind of their mound presence, I guess I would say.
Okay, I'm going to ask just maybe a dumb question, but I'd like you to expand on a couple of those things. Can you describe when you say command and being able to throw a ball, you know, a pitch at any time, at any count? Can you describe, just go a little more detail about what you mean by when you want to see command from a high school player? What does that mean?
I know that last season, our two top guys, our main top guy was out with Tommy John, who's a real legit prospect. So our two top guys became two right-handers. One that's about 82 to 84, the other about 85 to 87. And they were the best guys that I had all year for one simple reason. They throw any pitch at any time, 2-0 changeups, 3-1 sliders, 3-2 curveballs. They don't really care. So I know that that's done extremely well for us. I had a lefty about 84 to 85 that kept LSU scoreless through 6, throwing any pitch at any time. So when I'm out on the road and I see a kid throwing 82, 83, 84, but I see a 2-0 changeup or I see a 1-0 curveball, I get excited because I know that will directly play successfully at the next level. And if that velocity keeps going up while he has that command, command is harder to teach than velocity. You get velocity by mass, by strength, by maturity. Command can be really harder to teach. So I'm more geeked up by a guy throwing 2 or 3 pitches for strikes than I am just a guy with sheer velocity without any secondary pitches to back it up.
Okay. Does command, to you, mean that in addition to throwing any pitch in any count, does that mean that 2-0 pitch needs to be a strike? Or does that mean that the 0-2 or the 1-2 pitch needs to be a pitch that starts in the zone and goes out of the zone? Is that part of command, or is it more just kind of like when you're describing command, is it for a high school player, is it more just being able to throw any pitch in any count and feeling comfortable with it, like having the feel to throw, you know, that you're not afraid to throw a 2-0 changeup?
That's an excellent question. For me, you know, I ask my guys, I ask kids at camps, all these kids, I'll say, you know, rank your confidence in each one of your pitches on a 1 to 10 scale. And the guys that will give me an 8 or above on every pitch that they throw do extremely well. So if a kid says, I have a 9 confidence in my fastball, I can throw it in, out, up, down, 2-seam, 4-seam, you know, my curveball is a 6.5 and my changeup is a 3, that's not going to be, it's really going to be great. My changeup, I've heard 10,000 times. You know, when are you going to figure out that changeup? You want to pitch at the Division I level, and after Division I level, you need a changeup. If not, you certainly need absolute command of your breaking ball. So it's more than just throwing strikes. It's being able to make the ball do what you want it to do. That's command.
Okay. Heard you talk about changeups a couple of times here. Is that why you did your series that you have on Figured Out Baseball right now? Your series of videos is on the changeup. Is there a reason why you started there? I mean, is it that important of a pitch to you that you felt like you needed to share what you know about that to anybody who might be watching those videos?
Oh, man, that's another great question with a long answer. I mean, it's first the thing that I was best at. So, you know, I threw fastball my whole career to get people out on a changeup, you know, kind of Tom Glavine-esque, if you will, you know. So just showing a lot of fastball, getting people out with a changeup. And I think the changeup is really the hardest pitch to hit. It's the hardest to recognize, to pick up. I mean, look at Strasburg, the guy that throws extremely hard with a devastating changeup. And people don't practice it. I mean, you could get a machine to throw breaking balls, and you can get someone to throw breaking balls, but it's really hard to practice hitting a legitimate changeup. So the guys that have had truly the best pitchers that I've ever coached in my 20-plus years of college coaching have all had legitimate changeups. So And it's something that could be learned, but a lot of guys don't because they're trying to get velocity and they're trying to get a breaking ball, but they're always tweaking their changeup. They're never really learning and commanding and trusting their changeup. So it's definitely a passion.
We're with Wayne Mazzoni here. He's the pitching coach at Sacred Heart University, and what we were alluding to there is he's got a series of videos on the Figure It Out Baseball website, really with about everything that you need to know on the changeup. So if that's something that you're looking to incorporate or something you want to get better at, you can check out Coach Mazzoni's videos there on figuredoutbaseball.com. Coach, you're on your way to speak at a high school today. Can you give us just sort of a rundown of what you plan on talking about there?
Yeah, so this is, I do many of these at high schools, not just baseball, all different sports. And the audience is athletes and parents, guidance counselors and coaches. And the whole gist of the talk is what can you actually do as a high school athlete and parent to navigate the recruiting process. And I kind of break it down into really a three-step process that they have to go through. And obviously, I kind of said it before. If you're the best way to get recruited is to be crazy good at whatever you do, right? If you're really good, recruiting gets pretty easy. But if you're that 81, 82, 3, and you're just a solid player that needs to be seen a lot, chances are you might get overlooked. You're not going to stand out at an event like some other kids. So the whole idea is what is the system or what's the steps you should take to go from being a high school athlete to being one of the basically 6 or 7% that get to play at the college level. So that's what the talk is about, what those steps are and how you go about it.
So if there's, for that person that's listening that maybe is a good player but isn't the guy that goes to a showcase and really, really stands out with tools, but just a good, solid baseball player, without, going too far into it, just can you give us like one thing, maybe one thing you would point to for that type of high school athlete, any sport, besides what you're doing in a game, what can this person do to stand out to a coach to find, help himself to get on a college baseball, basketball, football roster?
Yeah, there's really two immediate steps, and the majority of people I speak to are really at the beginning of the recruiting process. So the first two steps both take some legwork. So, you don't hear it and go, yeah, I got it all solved. It could take months and maybe a year. Step number one is, what do I want out of a college experience? What are my grades? What do I want to study? How far from home? Size of the school? Why I want to be in the city or the suburbs or the country? You start to figure out about yourself and what you want, so you could start narrowing just the kinds of places you think you want to go to, not even factoring in the sport. And that's really done by just visiting schools. I mean, anytime someone's traveling for a holiday or visit somebody, if you could pop into 3 or 4 local schools that are in the area and just go, do I like these kind of places? And ultimately, if you're able to say some things about what you want, you start to shrink the list down, because it's just overwhelming. It's an overwhelming amount of schools where you could attend and play college sports. So the more factors you can shrink it down is going to start getting you in the right direction. And then the second piece, and we kind of talked about it earlier, is how do you figure out how good are you at your sport? Because mostly you're using your own gut, or your parents are telling you how great you are. I mean, we already said I went to a Division III school. My dad, I'm 50 years old now, Jeff, and my dad still thinks I totally got screwed and should have went to Notre Dame on a full ride for both sports, right? And parents think this because they love their kids, and they only see a small group of the kids trying to play at that next level. So the more they can ask their high school coach or travel coach or a scout, or go watch games, or go get evaluated at a showcase, and say, hey, listen, you're probably a D2 player, maybe a couple of D1s you could play at, some of the better D3s. Now you have a list that's manageable, and then it makes all the other steps much more easier to do. And, you alluded to it before. You've coached college baseball. You've been an associate scout. You still are. I mean, I guarantee you could take, the local high school kids and grade them out and pretty much earmark where they're going to go based on their current trajectory. Now, they could get a lot faster and stronger and dedicate themselves and blossom, and maybe they change their path. But I've been doing this so long, so have you, so have the high school coaches, the travel coaches. We're usually pretty spot on of where we think a kid's going to go. So they got to start asking people. And when you're able to narrow your list to 10 to 20, even 30, 40 schools, it just makes everything else much easier than going, yeah, I want to play anywhere at any college. It becomes overwhelming.
In my experience, is usually the kid that says, I'll play anywhere. Well, it takes that school from anywhere to call them for that kid to say, yeah, I don't think I want to go there. So it's just
Exactly.
a funny story, but there are when I go out to scout guys locally, if I see some uncommitted kids, I will send off some emails to some coaches. I'll get video and send off an email and say, like, hey, I think this kid might be able to play for you. He told me he is willing to play, wherever this coach is. And there was one kid that legitimately said, I'll play anywhere. And I said, you're telling me you would go play in Canada? Yeah, I'd play in Canada. You'd play in North Dakota. I'd play in North Dakota. You'd play in California. I'd play in California. So he was kind of to me, he had some things about him that screamed junior college. So a junior college from Montana called him, and he very quickly said, yeah, I don't want to go to Montana. So it's kids will say they'll play anywhere until they get a chance to play anywhere, and then they realize that it's not so true after all.
Yeah, it's like the guy that's out of work and says, I need a job, I'll do any job. Then you get a job, and it's an awful job. It's not so fun to have that job anymore.
So let's just stick with recruiting. I'm really enjoying the recruiting conversation. You've written books on the topic. You have obviously been recruiting in college for a long time. You've been recruited as a student athlete. So let's stick with this. What do you think, Coach, is the most difficult thing to recruit when it comes to pitchers? Just as an example, I think that probably one of the easiest things to recruit is velocity. Anybody can sit there with a gun and hold the gun up and say, well, that velocity plays or that velocity doesn't. What's something that you have found difficult to gauge and that maybe is maybe I don't know if inaccurate is the right word, or maybe something's just inconsistent with recruiting, that sometimes you really like this, a kid shows up to campus and it's not quite what you thought. Is there anything you can think of or point to with that?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, very good question. Great question so far. This is very near and dear to me, which is, it's just the intangibles. It's the competitiveness. It's their work ethic. It's their grit, their stick-to-itiveness. These are things you can't mention in watching a bullpen or even watching one game. I think one of the flaws of the current way we recruit with the amount of teams and tournaments and events is that you only get to see a kid, a couple of times before you have to kind of move on. And ultimately, we'd be able to watch a kid time and time again to know how he handles a bad umpire and a bad defense, or getting ripped, 3 batters in a row, and how does he respond to that? And so clearly at the college level, the guys that just have the developed mental game, the good habits, all that stuff, those are the guys that do the best at the college level, regardless of whether they pitch or play any position, or probably any sport for that matter. And it's the hardest to judge. So, that's where you have to go on what a coach says about this kid. You're basically trusting a coach to say, hey, listen, I love the way this kid pitches. Now tell me about him as a person. And most of the time they're shooting you straight, but that's the hardest part to measure. And I don't think there's any clear way to do it, but ultimately that's the biggest deciding factor on how well they do in college.
Kind of just answered this question, but I'd like to go a little more into it, is just how honest are coaches that you talk to? And I'll ask this with prefacing that I very rarely heard as a recruiter, yeah, you don't want this guy. He's not really a team player. He doesn't handle failure. Very, very rarely heard that from a high school or a travel coach. And more often than not, you're hearing about what a great kid he is, what a great leader he is. And maybe some of that is because at the high school level, there's very little failure for those type of players, and they don't really experience, any great levels of failure until they're in college, and maybe that brings out a different personality trait because they're dealing with failure in different situations. But let's just go back to the question. How honest do you feel like coaches are with you when it comes to just the personality of the player that you're getting?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. And first of all, I would say 15, 20% of the time I hear from coaches, you don't want that kid. I get that a lot more than it sounded like you got for whatever reason. But I definitely get that more than you'd think. I've never really known a high school coach to steer me wrong. They're, just the nature of it, they're not in it. They don't get any added benefit by getting a kid necessarily to the next level. It doesn't, exactly help their program. They're helping this kid just to be nice. And most of the travel coaches, 90% of them are good guys. They're trying to help their kids get to the next level. But I think because it benefits their brand, their business, some of them are not to be trusted. Some of them are over promoting kids, or they have a kid that's not necessarily good enough for you, and they're trying to promote that kid. So you're right there?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, no problem. So, yeah, I think that it's a case-by-case basis with the travel coach, whether he's really shooting you straight. And, again, most of them are pretty good, but some of them have a reputation of, like, don't trust what that guy says. It's just from a track record if they might have steered you wrong on another kid.
Part of the difference between your experience and mine might be that I coached for 8 years, but I also coached at 5 different schools. And I was as a young coach, I think a lot of young coaches do, and you kind of do this to a point. You're moving around a lot, and I never got a chance to stay anywhere for more than a couple of years, and it's difficult to develop relationships with coaches. That might be part of it. Is just that you've probably been you've been dealing with coaches. I'm sure there are some coaches you've been dealing with for a long time that you have a good relationship with, and most of the time I was talking to coaches that I really didn't have any past with, in a lot of cases. But regardless,
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
And with as far as just players and kind of going back to what they experience in college, and probably why I'm assuming why you think it's one of the most difficult things to assess is that there really is not a lot of failure, but also there's another thing that they don't experience a lot in high school is not being the guy, not being the frontline guy, whether it's on the mound or whether it's a position player who for the first time is experiencing not being a starter. How much of that do you think becomes a factor when it's difficult to assess a real character? How much of that do you think plays in when a guy comes on campus and kind of deals with for the first time that he's not the center of attention anymore?
Yeah, I think that's definitely an issue. And the reality is, when you get to a new place, obviously the kids who are already on the team are going to kind of take you in and they're going to help you along. But at the same time, they're looking at you a little cross-eyed, like this kid's here to take my innings or take my at-bats or take my spot. And, it's competitive just to get time as a freshman. So that's a big piece. And then if you do crack in and you do get to play, no one takes it easy because it's your first time on the mound or in the batter's box or you're new. No one cares, So, I mean, we tell that to our guys all the time. We're prepping to play, a big-time program or whatnot. They could care less that we're practicing on a field that's plowed. That it's February, we're shoveling snow to take ground balls, and they're in their state-of-the-art stadium in 85 degrees. They don't take it easy when we show up because of that. So, kids do have to learn that is a process to go from being the man all the time to it's going to be really, really competitive. But many will blossom in that situation, and that only makes them want to get better, and others will falter. I mean, it's something that has to be, practiced.
If you were speaking to someone who's in that situation right now, maybe somebody who just experienced their first semester, their first year in college, and they're sort of experiencing that the difficulty of failing more, and it's a lot more difficult to hit all of a sudden, it's a lot more difficult to get people out, and maybe their coaches haven't done the best job of helping the player through that situation. But if you were speaking to that player right now, what would be something that you would just kind of say to encourage that player or to give them a little bit of perspective?
That's a great question, too, which I think it's make sure that you have a week-long, a month-long, a year-long, a lifelong, whatever it is, habits and routines that are just constantly trying to get you better. And then, when things do start to click, those are the things you're still going to continue to work on. So if you build, not every entrepreneur, not everyone in every walk of life always succeeds instantly. In fact, you're better off sometimes if you don't, right? There's many books written about how kids learn by failure and how anyone in business learns by failure. So there's merit to that. It stinks while you're going through it. It's not great to get, your new cutter that you're working on pounded all over the place. But eventually when you get it right, it's going to help you really grow and be successful long term. And the fact is, I tell my guys all the time, everything I'm saying to win a regional game, to get to a regional and win a regional game. I'm not teaching you a bunt defense to have it figured out here on October 15th in the fall with no one around. We need to do this bunt defense like it's June 5th, and we're playing at Clemson, and you need to throw out a guy who turned down the third round going down the line home to first. So, that you've got to pursue excellence. And eventually, when you keep doing that and you have these habits, the cream rises to the top. So there's always some bumps in the road short term, but the winners show themselves over the long term.
So what are some Wayne Mazzoni habits for success? What do you do in your own life, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it may be? What are some things that you do to kind of keep yourself on track? Make sure that you are doing some things you need to do to continue to be your best.
Oh, boy, that's another unbelievable question. I mean, the fact is, this is something I try to impart on the college guys, although I know I wasn't ready at their age. But, I'm much more of a learner now, a lifelong learner now than I was back then. Back then in high school, college, you were just trying to get through it to get the grade. Now I just love learning. So whether it's about baseball or anything. So me personally, I have two things that are crucial to me. Number one is I try to get a very, very, very difficult workout in every day. So in 2019, in June, I did my first ever Ironman, which was a great experience. Swimming, biking, running at a level I've never done before. Now I'm doing CrossFit. So I wake up every day and have to get in a very difficult workout early in the morning before my day even gets started. So that's one key piece that keeps me locked in and keeps me energized, helps me sleep, makes me nice with my wife and kids and all that. And then the second thing is I try to do some type of mindfulness thing, whether that's a guided meditation, breathing, some kind of awareness. It's easier now to get distracted in life more than ever with these crazy phones that we have, so you have to carve out time to just be where your feet are, breathe, enjoy your company. I think it's the biggest issue all humans face in 2019, 2020, or whenever anyone listens to this, is how to be where you are. Just enjoy the conversation, that's what baseball practice has become in a lot of ways. I love that the guy has 3 hours off their phone, off playing Fortnite, Call of Duty. They're just locked into what they're doing. And the earlier you can learn to just enjoy the moment, because life is a gift. You don't know how many of these you're going to have. That would be something I would try to impart to everybody.
Words of a wise coach, for sure. The mindfulness.
I got gray hair. It didn't come there by accident.
I love it. The mindfulness is something that I have been wanting to learn and have been making an attempt to learn more about recently. And we've got another contributor on the website, Sarah Erdner, who's done a couple of series of videos on the mental game, and mindfulness is something that she and I have talked a lot about. Could you just describe to people, you said, be where your feet are, but how do you do that? How do you, as a teenager, what does a teenager need to do or should be doing to just kind of take some time to be mindful of where they are? I know it's maybe just a backwards type of question, but just somebody who's got their phone in their hand all the time and has got a million things happening. And I really believe that kids today are busier and are being asked to do more things than maybe any other generation before. So what is a young person supposed to do, or what can a parent encourage their child to do just to be more mindful day to day?
Okay, so which is a terrific question. I think if you take baseball specifically, if you ask any kid playing at any level, from a little leaguer to a pro, what percentage of your performance is based on your mental? We know it has physical, your height, your weight, your speed, your strength, your flexibility. We know it has skill, your velocity, your curve, your command, your swing, your technique of fielding, etc. And then your mental game, your thoughts, your inner talk. If you ask them, how do you break that down? Most kids are going to tell you anywhere from 50 to 80% of their performance is mental based. And then the next question is always, okay, if it's that important, what do you do to practice it? And then they always look at you with like a deer in the headlights. So what we do with our college guys, and man, they love it, is we actually lead them on it. So whether it's on the field, in the classroom, starting off practice with 3 minutes of breathing, we make it a part of everything that we do, and then show them, here's technology. There's probably 5 or 6 or 7 apps you could get on your phone that are tremendous I use it when I do my own thing. It's almost impossible unless you're the Dalai Lama to lie down on a bed or sit in a chair and do unbelievable meditation. But when you have it guided and someone's leading you through it, it becomes much easier. And then when you start to do it like anything, when you start practicing, you get better at it, you enjoy it, and then you see it translating to the field. And in many ways, 10 minutes of guided meditation 4 times a week will make you a better player. And when they start to actually see it, and I do things with my college guys, after every outing, they have to fill out a post-outing thing, of a variety of things. And one of the things is how did your mental training work help you in this outing? Or were you mentally where you wanted to be? Were you worried about your ERA, why coach was warming somebody up, or the umpire, or that you didn't have your best curveball? And we talk about it. So it's just like anything, whatever gets focused on improves, or whatever gets measured gets improved. It just has to be something that becomes important to them. That's all.
So for somebody that is listening to that and is kind of intimidated by mindfulness or by the thought of meditating, maybe that their idea of meditation is what you see on TV or in a movie or whatever. Well, tell me, is there that you're aware of? Is there an app or a website or something that people that are interested but are maybe intimidated by it, that maybe they can go to kind of get started in a less intimidating way, or to give them just a better idea of really what guided meditation is about?
Yeah, no question. So I'll preface that with saying one of our former players at Sacred Heart, a shortstop, actually funny enough named Zach Short, just got added to the 40-man roster for the Cubs. It just recently happened. When he got drafted into the Cubs system in 2016, first thing he sent me a text like 3 days later. He goes, "Holy mackerel, we're doing mindfulness." So the Cubs organization teaches and practices mindfulness and yoga and all those things. So first of all, they see these pro clubs doing it. It's impactful. I think every major league team now has a mental skills coach, and they have them through the minor league system. But the apps that I have seen, there's one called Calm. There's Headspace. There's 10% Happier, and the one that I use, which is called Insight Timer. Plus, they could probably go to YouTube and for free just type in, guided sports meditation and find something that clicks for them. Everyone's a little bit different, and you'll find something that hits. But when you're just like actually told by a coach or say, for 10 minutes I'm going to focus on this, and at the end you feel better about yourself and you feel more focused and calm, and helps you study better or be nicer to your girlfriend or, helps you practice better or play better, you start buying into it. And you certainly read stories all the time about pros that improve their mental game and thus improve their performance. And ultimately, that's what kids want. They want to be better on the field.
No question. And I know for me personally, not that people want to hear about me personally, they came here to listen to you, but I have 3 kids that are 5 years and younger, and it's very difficult to find time to exercise some days and to meditate. But I know that on days that I do it, I'm just better in all facets of my life, as far as how you interact and treat other people, to just how you're feeling about yourself, and just kind of the clarity of your mind. So I can just speak to it personally as well. I'm not a coach and I'm not an athlete anymore, but just in your basic life, everyday life, it's impactful.
Well, and I'll tell you, a couple things, which is, number one, you need it as much as anyone, right? Just like they say on an airplane, put on your mask first before you help anyone else. If you're better at Jeff Stanek being Jeff, you're going to be better, to your kids. And we probably don't want to cover it on this podcast, but when the record button is off, I'll give you some very good ideas for you personally of how you can get some exercise and mindfulness during the course of having a job, being a husband, and raising 3 very young kids. I can give you some tips from been there, done that.
I appreciate that. When the record button's off, we're going to get into it.
Yep, you got it.
Let me ask you just 1 or 2 more questions, Coach Mazzoni, and then I'll let you go. We've been talking about a lot of great things. We've gotten into a lot of good things, but I'd like to just kind of, switch gears just a little bit and ask you about yourself, which really we haven't spent any time talking about you, which I probably would have expected, coming into this, other than kind of getting through your bio. in a couple of questions I asked about just things that you've done. But I want to ask you a little bit just about you as a coach. You've been coaching for a long time, but you still you sound invigorated when you talk about coaching, and it's something that you clearly enjoy doing. How has Wayne Mazzoni progressed from a 1992 graduate assistant at Nova Southeastern to the current pitching coach at Sacred Heart? What are some ways that you have grown and progressed as a coach that maybe have been the most impactful on your own career?
Another great question. I would say that with the exception of working way too many weekends, coaching is the best job in the world. I mean, it's absolutely the best job in the world. And I think it's that for a variety of reasons, but one is the guys I'm with never age. When you get too old, we send you off, we graduate you, and we get the young pups in, So no matter what, I'm dealing with 17 to 23 constantly. So those kids have a lot of energy. You better be able to keep up. I'll jump in and do lifts with them from time to time, all kinds of things. It's just, throw batting practice. The kids, number one, keep you young. I would say that in the way I've grown in terms of coaching would be two things, and I still have room to grow, goodness gracious. And that's what's another enjoyable thing about it. There's some great baseball people out there, and, I've listened already to some of the other podcasts that you've recorded. I feel old because you did a podcast with J.J. Edwards, who I coached at Sacred Heart, who is one heck of a player and kid and is already a tremendous coach, is going to keep being a great coach. Even though personally, I'd never let him know that because I don't want him to let his head get too big.
I won't tell him either for the same reason.
Yeah. In the beginning, I tried to correct kids too quickly. I mean, I got screamed at by a kid in 1992, my first year coaching, when he struck out on an at-bat, and before he put his bat down, I was trying to tell him what he did wrong, and he just lit me to pieces, and I realized, well, I certainly wouldn't want to hear about my swing the moment I just struck out. So, I've learned how to deliver the message. That's number one. And then secondly, I've just, as things we talked about before, these habits that I've learned about, how to stay off your phone sometimes, how to actually meditate, how to exercise, how to eat right. You try to pass those on because I'm coaching people. I want to win games. I want to make major leaguers, but I just want to make people better people. And sometimes they'll get the message when they're a sophomore, and sometimes they'll get the message when they're 32 and they're changing jobs and they got two kids, or, you never know. I mean, I get texts and calls from guys that want to change careers and need advice, and that's the stuff, kind of the counseling side of it that I enjoy. I still enjoy, of course, the baseball piece of it, the competitive nature of it, but the part of helping people grow never gets old, and that's why I think it's the greatest job, and I'm passionate about it.
Have your goals changed at all as a coach since you first got in, as you mature, as you grow and you go through this everything you've been through? Have your goals changed as a coach?
Do you mean my personal goals or the goals for my team?
Personal. Your personal goals as a coach.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, I've now been at Sacred Heart 14 years. I've had opportunities to leave for the quote-unquote bigger, better paying job, whatever. And I haven't taken it because I kind of got to a place where I love my house. I love my neighborhood. I love my wife and kids are very happy. My personal life is way overtaken my professional life in terms of the big picture. So, I mean, I'll look at sometimes these dudes, Lord knows in college football, that have had 17 jobs, and I get it, but, my wife is a teacher. We like our lives. So what ultimately, back in my 20s, I would go, I just want to be the head coach at Clemson. Now I just want to be a coach. I don't care what the circumstances are, great field, not a great, I still want to improve, but I just want to coach people. So I've changed in terms of what I thought, you always thought you'd be happier at a bigger, better program, and now I don't feel that.
I just think that's probably is something that a lot of people will experience as they get older, no matter what their job is. But I like to hear it from other people and love to hear your perspective on things. I've really been enjoying this podcast, and I hate to let it go. We'll probably have to do another one of these at some point. I think there's still a lot of things to talk about. And it's been a good conversation. But if you have time for one more question, I'd like to ask you one more question.
Absolutely, 100%.
If you were talking to a young coach, or just you guys have a volunteer there that's a young guy, 23 years old, out of school, and you may have already answered this to a point, but what would you tell that coach? Just blanket advice. The guy's got his first coaching job. He's young. He's hungry. He's energetic. What would be maybe one piece of advice that you would give to that coach when he's first getting started out?
The beginning of college coaching in baseball and probably every other sport but football, basketball is just kind of awful. Not in terms of the responsibilities and you're around coaching and you get to make an impact, but now you're a couple years out of college. You're making $0 to $5,000. You've got 3 buddies from college that you used to room with, or 3 knuckleheads that make $65,000 selling copiers, and you're going, what in the world am I doing with my life? My parents are screaming at me, get out of the house. I can't take my girlfriend to a good dinner. And the answer is just to stick it out. I mean, the gap in my coaching resume was from me just going, how long can I keep doing this at this amount of money? And said, I got to start making legitimate money. And then when I met my future wife, I said, I found the woman. Now I got to get back into the career that I always loved, and that got me back into coaching. But the beginning of coaching in baseball and non-revenue producing sports at most places is just terrible. So if you want to do it, invest in yourself, learn, network, stick it out for the long haul, and you're going to be absolutely A-okay. If you go, I don't know if I really like this, I don't like coaching, I don't like this and that and the other thing, get out now, start getting into another career and build yourself up there. But, that soul searching in the early part of after college was the hardest time of my life, and I'm going to guess it's the hardest part of just about everybody's life. You don't have your buddies, you're not on a team, you don't have professors, you don't have an advisor. I found it, 22 to 25, 26 being the torturous time of my life.
Just a great perspective overall, Coach Mazzoni. I've really enjoyed this podcast. I think that we should absolutely schedule another one, because there are so many areas, so many things to talk about that we didn't even really get into a lot of pitching stuff today, which I'd like to pick your brain about a lot of that as well. But for everyone that's listening, this is Wayne Mazzoni, who's with us today. He's the pitching coach at Sacred Heart University. He's been there since 2006. A really well-spoken, very bright guy, great perspective, and certainly wise beyond your years. Coach Mazzoni, it's been a real pleasure having you here today. I can't thank you enough for choosing to join me here on this podcast today.
Well, and I want to kind of right back at you. I want to thank you because, you've got a lot going on in your life, and yet you're still doing this. And, if from this podcast and the other ones that you do, if a couple of nuggets go to a couple of people, then it's all worthwhile. So I want to thank you for doing it, because I think you're really on the right path. This was absolutely fantastic and really enjoyable.
Very, very enjoyable for me as well. I hope everyone listening enjoyed it as much as we did. Coach, thanks again, and hopefully we'll have you back here at some point, and best of luck to you going forward.
All right, sounds great, Jeff.